From Wizard Home Loans to the Yellow Brick Road, businessman Mark Bouris has been a financial disruptor and innovator. As a loan broker, he's riding the wave of Sydney's housing boom, where 60% of lending is to investors. And official figures out today show that's still rising. I spoke to Yellow Brick Road chairman Mark Bouris earlier today. Mark Bouris, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Firstly, you've oversight of hundreds of loans through, or probably thousands, through Yellow Brick Road. Do you think we're in a housing bubble? Are prices crazy?
I think, well, in terms of what our lending policy, that's not the case, because we won't lend on crazy prices, because our LVR ratios have actually been reduced of late, so we don't lend more than 80% on investment properties now. So that's the first thing. But do I think people in Sydney are paying some crazy prices? Absolutely. We're not experiencing the same valuation and purchase price disparity that in Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Darwin, Adelaide. We're not seeing it there. We're not seeing it outside of Sydney within New South Wales either. And in Sydney, it's only in certain pockets. So anecdotally, we hear about it. I mean, I hear about it, but we are actually seeing it in some of our transactions. But what's generally is the case is this is not a debt-fueled price spike. So it's not being spiked by debt, which is what's happened in the past. So it's not lenders encouraging people to borrow more, to pay more. It just seems to be the purchasers are prepared to pay more, and I think that comes in a lack of supply.
But it also isn't that being fueled by debt, people feel more comfortable about paying higher prices if there is cheap debt available?
I think the cheap debt part does help. People feel comfortable about paying a higher price, but generally speaking, the loan-to-value ratios are quite low relative to what I've experienced in past booms. I mean, this is a relative game. So if you looked at the boom up to, say, 2007-8, it was, generally speaking, fueled by more debt as a percentage of the purchase price than it is today. So during that period, debts were 105%, 110%, 95%, 97%. There's very few lenders in the market today even lending over 90%. In fact, most, if it's not owner-occupied, are pushed back to the 80%. So there's a lot more responsible lending practices, and that's been imposed by the regulator, as well as the banks in terms of their capital requirements. But there is still an exuberance in Sydney amongst many buyers to pay a higher price than everybody else. So there's this competitive element. I must have that property and I'm going to beat everyone in the room. But they're spending it out of their own equity.
So do you think that sort of insulates us from a big bust? Because there's a report out this week from UNSW that, in particular, the apartment glut in Sydney is going to see a 10% price correction by Christmas. Do you think that's possible? Do you think a big bust is possible?
I'm not sure about by Christmas. It's always possible. I mean, what creates a bust or a change in the current structure of pricing is either people can't afford to live in their property or own their property if it's an investment property anymore because their wages change, which is probably unlikely to happen. They lose a job, probably unlikely to happen because unemployment's not rocketing out of control. Interest rates go up. Now, it's not likely to happen between here and the end of the year. So I don't know where the supply is going to come from existing stock. The question is, and I haven't seen the UNSW report, but if the UNSW report is saying there is a glut of new supply of product in Sydney, that definitely will affect purchase pricing, apartment prices, I should say, in certain parts of Sydney. But that would depend on there being a massive amount of supply. I mean, Sydney has been undersupplied for a long time, which is causing the house price increase or the apartment price increases. Undersupply. What could also make a big change is if they make some changes, the government makes some changes to negative gearing. If there's a negative gearing change, that would have an impact, I think.
This house price narrative has just been driven so much by Sydney and Melbourne. But taking a look at the rest of the country, do you actually see a little bit of pain happening anywhere? I mean, we've seen in Perth or Western Australia, growth has come right off. The mining boom has disappeared. Unemployment is rising. Do you see pain in parts of the country?
I don't see any pain, but I see worry and concern. People are starting to get concerned that their house price that they've been used to, which grows every year, year after year after year, hasn't happened, and that wealth effect starts to bother people. In West Australia in particular, we have a number of offices and a number of brokers who sell our product. And in West Australia, we're getting less volume than we've had in the past. West Australia's been driven largely by the mining boom, as we know, and everybody's got a second job and everybody's paying $6 a cup of coffee. That's starting to all taper back. and it's becoming more relatively appropriately priced to Sydney. So, you know, you pay $60 for a cup of coffee in Perth up until about a year ago. So I'm noticing a change in the pricing structures in West Australia. I haven't seen any panic at this stage. Certainly, you know, the portfolios all look pretty clean. Everybody's looking at their portfolios for Australia, looks pretty clean. Adelaide's still pretty clean. Darwin is a special case. It always keeps going because it's an army town and there's a lot of infrastructure in the place. So Darwin seems to be pretty good, still going up, but it's an aberration relative to the rest of the country.
The Prime Minister ruled out any changes to negative gearing or the special capital gains treatment for investors. Is that the wrong call, do you think?
I don't think it's the wrong call, but I think the call should be let's examine it, because there may be some parts of the negative gearing and capital gains regime, which, to be frank with you, they don't work unless they're together. They've got to be together. There are some parts of that you could use to perhaps stimulate certain parts of the new property market, as opposed to keeping the current stock of house prices high or investment properties high. What you want is there to be demand for new properties that stimulates construction and infrastructure and all the other stuff. Right now, the capital gains treatment, special capital gains treatment and negative gearing for the difference between rent and interest, all it seems to do is stimulate across the board. Now, I don't know if you need to stimulate across the board prices. You need to stimulate activity in the new stuff. We want new construction. We need to be a construction-led recovery in this country, because we're not going to get it from mining. We're not going to get it from government spending. And it looks like we're not going to get it as the difference between imports and exports. And we're not going to get it from business investment. So there's only one place, and that's construction. So I think they should start to look at how do you tweak the old capital gains regime for property or any asset class for that matter, and how do you treat and tweak the negative gearing part of that, and in order to get better fiscal economic policy for Australia.
Would it create a collapse in prices? Would it depress prices if that happened, which is what the government has been warning?
Well, if you adopt the Labor Party regime, which Shorten's trying to promote, I think it could, because you at least must grandfather those people who've already bought into that environment. You can't say to somebody, oh, you bought 5 years ago, you bought it because you wanted the negative gearing and you wanted the capital gains treatment. By the way, we're going to let you have those deductions for the last 5 years, but from now on we're not going to let you have it, because all of a sudden they change the dynamic for that particular individual. That means they've got to go and earn more money, which is probably impossible, in order to pay their mortgage, which could be a disaster, because all of a sudden those people would start to put supply onto the market, and that will create a dysfunction, like a fiscal dysfunction, and all of a sudden people start to panic, and that's when you see prices dropping, land values change. That actually is a threat to the financial system, because that asset class is what all the banks and us, people like us, hold. So I think they're right in that regard. You shouldn't do something rash. You could do it though with a whole lot of conditions attached to it, grandfathering processes or transitioning it out over a 5-year period or whatever. And that's why I think it does need a study. It needs a proper study. It's time to review it.
Taking a look at super is another thing that the government said that they didn't want to touch, but there's been a lot of call for tightening on concessions for high earners of superannuation in particular. I mean, your company does do superannuation products. The Prime Minister's ruled out any changes to that. Where do you sit on that?
I think that's a political decision, because it's one of those ones that's too hard before a potential next election coming up, or at least I want to get this budget through and make sure everything goes through smoothly. There has been a lot of tax changes too, and the tax environment's pretty complicated, and I think the whole superannuation discussion is really around tax. You know, like the tax benefits associated with it, and why should a wealthy person get a better deal than a person who's not so wealthy. Those policies or changes, isolated changes that attack one sector of the market, I think are ill-conceived. You need to actually have a whole solution. And I know we've had reports from Henry, we've had all sorts of studies. Nothing ever gets done because the politics is just too complicated. Where I sit on it, I don't think they should touch it in isolation. They should look at doing something in a proper structure.
You're going into the financial advice space with a product that you say straddles a sort of self-service technology, but also the traditional advice model. what are the costs of this, and what sort of commissions is Yellow Brick Road going to be taking on it? How is it a business for you?
Okay, so this week we launched a product called Guru. Now, Guru is free of charge, so there's no commissions back to us on Guru, the Guru session. What the Guru session effectively is this. We take your information, you feed your information into our system. It's electronic, it's into our data system and into our software with the help of what we call an advice coach, someone in one of our branches. And what we're trying to do is simply build your crystal ball for the future. We're not telling you where you should invest your money or what asset class you should buy. We're simply saying, look, based on how much you're earning now, how much you'll earn in the future, this is what you'll have when you turn whatever age it is you want to retire, 65 or 70. You tell us what your aspirations are for when you retire. Like, I like to be able to go on holiday every year and I want to do this, that and the other. We then build those into the software, and the data is then compiled, and we spit out a gap. If there is a gap, we'll say, this is what you would like to do, this is what you're going to have on your current situation. You make a choice what you want to do after that. We're not asking you to do anything from that point.
How do you make money on that? You are obviously a business, not a charity.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't make any money on that. So what we're trying to do is create a conversation. So the first and most important thing is actually to have a conversation. So it is important to decouple from the process your data and the compilation of your data without charging a fee, because it's yours. So what the financial planning system does today is they hold you hostage. They say, come and see me. You give me all your data, but by the way, this is going to cost you $3,000. Give me all your data, and I'll build you the same stuff that we're going to do electronically for you. I'll build you a scenario, show you what you're going to look like when you turn 65 or 70. I'll build that for you, but that's going to cost you $3,000. We're saying we'll do that for nothing, because that's your data, and that should be you should not be charged for that. My conversation with you after that is, what would you like to do now? How would you like to bridge that gap? That's when we start to charge. So we're just decoupling the bit that's yours that you shouldn't be charged for, and you're in control of that. And then we're saying, okay, if you want to execute, here's one of our authorised representatives. He's a financial planner, or she's a financial planner. We'll sit down and we'll show you how you can build something to cover that gap over time. And for that, we charge you $900, and then ongoing is $600 per annum for any review. But you're not obliged to do a review. You can do it once and never come back. We give you a statement of advice if you ask for it once you've done the Guru session and you're looking at the crystal ball and look at what your future's going to look like. And
you also have that person's data then in your system, which to any business, a person's data is quite valuable.
It's valuable for us only if we can sell you something. It's not of value to us unless we can actually do something with it. But it's certainly valuable for the person we've just dealt with, because it includes all your superannuation, includes all your life insurance information, includes all your asset classes. It compiles everything into one place. And using a whole lot of calculators in one place, we're actually able to show you how you're going to end up when you turn 65, based on a whole lot of assumptions. That we sort of say, what's your risk profile, for example? We ask you, what do you think your risk profile is? We're not giving you any advice. There is no advice in that first part of the Guru session. It's just opening up a book and saying, this is what you look like today. And this is what you will look like when you turn 65, based on the assumptions that you give our coach, our money coach, the guy or girl that sits in front of you and actually guides you through it. So it's a decoupling of the first part of the process that normally you're held hostage to and you pay for. That should cost nothing. And by the way, as a provider, we shouldn't charge you for that, because, as you say, it's your information. And if you choose to supply that information to us and give us an opportunity to have a talk to you, we shouldn't be charging you for that. And the financial planning system does charge you for that now, and they charge you a lot. And that's scary. It's a scary thing.
The financial planning system was found to have some serious flaws to it in all the scandals that we saw at Macquarie, at Commonwealth Bank, at numerous other of the big banks, because they were doing it for free, and therefore they needed the commissions to make it a value proposition to them. So how are you avoiding any of those problems that they have exposed already?
Yeah, ours is fee for service, so we're not seeking commission from you. So we're not back-ending something. We're not Macquarie Bank who just sell Macquarie products. We sell everybody's products. We're agnostic. We'll find the product that suits you best. We are not a commission taker, except in relation to life insurance, which is exempted from the legislation. We take a commission from the life insurance company if we set you up with a life policy. We charge you a fee. We charge you a fee for the advice, and we charge you an ongoing fee for the upgrade of the advice every year, or a re-evaluation of the advice every year. So we're fee for service, we're not a commission taker.
Financial planning is almost a dirty word now, following the scandals that we've had. Is it going to be a long road back, do you think, to convincing Australians that they should go to some professional that they don't ordinarily have a relationship with and expose themselves financially to those people?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the financial planning industry has had a pretty tough time over the past couple of years in particular, and there's been lots of revelations about some bad practices. Generally speaking, those practices apply to the 20% of consumers or customers in the country who are wealthy. There's 80% of the country who get no advice from anybody. You know, they might have 80 grand in their super or $100,000 in the super. They don't have enough investable assets for a financial planner to talk to them. We aren't even looking at that 20%. We're looking at the 80%. So we're actually going to the 80% of the country and saying, look, for free, you can get an assessment of where you sit today and where you'll be sitting when you turn 65. You don't have to do anything else after that. We're only interested in those people who ordinarily don't get any advice. We're not actually that interested in those people who do get advice. I mean, we're happy to talk to those, but our marketplace is the 80% of Australians who don't think they deserve advice, are scared of advice, can't afford advice, don't think they're privileged enough advice, or just don't understand advice. Our business proposition is to talk to those individuals and say, look, there is something you can do. Or if you can't do anything now, have a look at it now, and maybe come back to us in 5 years' time. Or just come back to us every year for the money coach to talk to you, just to reassess your position. No statement of advice, no execution whatsoever. We're trying to build, as I said earlier, a conversation with the 80% of Australians who don't get any advice from anybody. That 20% where all the scandals have been sitting, I'm going to leave that to the banks. I'm going to leave that to the financial planning industry.
It's been the broad Australian public who have seen the problems that financial planning has brought. Even if it is only for a small part of the community, everyone's seen it. Is it an uphill battle for financial planners, do you think, in Australia now?
I think so, yeah. I think there's an uphill battle reputationally to show that they actually have the expertise actually to take you to where you want to go to when you turn 65 or 70, whatever it is they're trying to, whatever the objective is. And to be frank with you, there are a lot of good quality financial planners too, but generally speaking, that small percentage of people out there robbing people and stealing money and just giving crap advice, or reckless, or have no qualifications, or putting them into some scheme, there's backhanders, etc. You know, that is not the majority of financial planners in this country. The big issue for financial planners too is that people don't even know what a financial planner is. Most people, they wouldn't even know where to find one. They don't even know who to recommend as a financial planner. And when they do, they don't know if they're any good or not. And what qualifies someone to be a good financial planner? Is it the fact that this particular individual is a great investor? I mean, Warren Buffett would be a great financial planner, but you're not going to get advice from him. So it's opaque. So, and I think that's the uphill battle, the opaqueness of it. And why would I hand you, and they're expensive. And the reason a financial planner is expensive is because the business model they operate under is that if I'm a financial planner, I need to run my office, I need to pay rent, I need to find my client, I need to originate a client, I then need to do the fact find with you. That's all taking time and money. Then I need to build your statement of advice. And then I need to start to execute on the advice. And then I need to send you the bill. And then I need to follow you up all the time. So they're going to say, listen, I'm not going to talk to you unless you've got $500,000 of investable assets, and you can pay me somewhere from $3,000 straight up. That's an uphill battle for the financial planning industry, because it just looks like it's too expensive and it's out of everybody's reach. And it's the 80% of Australians who have contributed this $1 trillion plus in assets in superannuation who need the advice. I mean, to be frank with you, the government should be doing something about this. And the government's the ones who implemented this legislation to make superannuation compulsory, so that the government's not stuck with some big problem when everyone turns 65, some economic, social problem. Yet at the same time, we're not doing anything for those 80% of the country who don't think they can afford advice or deserve advice. And that's sort of what we're trying to do. I mean, this is not robo-advice, but it's sort of robust advice is sort of where we're sort of trying to take. It's a blend or a mixture or a hybrid of digital help, digital crystal ball gazing, and then some advice attached to it if you want it. So we're trying to break up the financial planning process.
Mark Bouris, thank you very much for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you.